What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Champion concepts are one of the more underappreciated pieces of work in League of Legends, especially recently since Riot kind of stopped mentioning concepts at all about 2 years ago. But if we take a look back, there's a lot of cool champions that have had some potential to get made that kind of slipped under the rug but are actually super cool to take a look at. And a really long time ago, back when Riot actually shared information about their cancelled champions and concepts that were still in development, one of the concept artists for Riot was showing off a bit of his personal portfolio on the official forums, and one of the things that was in there was some information surrounding the champion concept known as MARDOK, the Fisher of Souls. MARDOK is a champion concept that was brought up a really long time ago, and although there hasn't been any news on him for a long while, he still does have a little bit of potential since he is a fairly fleshed out concept. However, I'm going to go right ahead and say that MARDOK has officially been cancelled. So as for how much potential he actually has to be released, I can't exactly say, but despite that, it's not impossible for his character to be revived into someone else. And MARDOK especially is super cool to me since he is someone that was being developed around the beta of League of Legends. And here's the official piece that was presented for the MARDOK concept, and there's a lot of information that we can get just from the picture. First off, let's take a look at his story. His lore excerpt reads, "Many years ago, the archaeologist known as Dr. Mark Strauss vanished during an expedition to the caves south of Arden. Whatever dark energies he was investigating there both sustained and twisted him over the ages, granting undeath. Now known as MARDOK, this skeletal fisherman thrives on the life force of other creatures. It is this hunger that has finally drawn him out of the caves and back towards civilization." And that's the lore segment that we know about for sure, although it's not entirely detailed. It is a pretty short and sweet summary of what his character might have been like and the motivations behind his actions. As for his character, MARDOK is some kind of undead fisherman, and judging by his title, there's probably some undead magic involved with him as well. I'd imagine that based on the backstory of him being an archaeologist in the past, he's a little bit of an intellectual, but maybe the dark energy consumed him now, and he's a little bit more intense and serious, and especially villainous. One thing that really interests me is that based off of the lore segment, he seems to be very much an evil or villainous character, but he's not attached to any entity like Noxus, or the Void, or any faction or group or anything like that. He kinda just wants to feast on people. As for his abilities and gameplay design, there's a lot that you can get from just the original concept picture. His basic weapon looked like it was a harpoon kind of thing, so it's likely that he had a melee basic attack. He also had some kind of a pickaxe weapon, so maybe one of his abilities involved using the pickaxe to attack someone for like a nice chunk of damage. I mean, he does look a lot like a miner with that helmet too, and his story does involve spending a lot of time in caves, so an ability involving the pickaxe isn't too far-fetched. As well, one of his abilities was called Net Toss, and it looks like it was a skill shot that threw out a net that would probably damage and root enemies hit by it for a short period of time. It was probably area of effect and not single target like Rengar's kind of is, and in addition, he also had an ability called Grim Reeler, and judging by the picture, it looks like he throws out a fishing hook and maybe reels in a target, so maybe it's like some kind of crowd control effect that you could launch out and reel someone in at you, or maybe it's just like some kind of ranged harass. And he had like some kind of a soul meter that measures the amount of souls he collected, so my best guess for that is that he had some sort of mechanic, maybe it was his passive, that revolved around collecting souls from unit kills in the game. And the souls lasted for a short period or maybe a medium amount of time, and based on how many souls he collected, he would power up his soul meter or energy kind of thing, and based off of that, his abilities would get stronger or perhaps gain empowered effects. Now that seems like a pretty cool mechanic for a gameplay design. You collect souls and then you unleash them for like this super powerful effect. It's kind of like a much more proactive and impactful version of Thresh's passive. Maybe it made his abilities get new effects, or maybe it just made them flat out stronger, but regardless, that kind of minigame collection that has a much more meaningful impact is something that we haven't entirely seen yet in the game, and could be really cool to play with, and is something that gives MARDOK a little bit of that unique flavor that every champion in the game needs to have. But this is kind of just speculation based off of the picture. I mean, there's a lot of information showed on that, but the only definite thing is how he looked like, his lore, and some of the concept drawings for a couple other things. If you guys have some ideas or guesses about what MARDOK's gameplay might have looked like, I'd love to hear them in the comments. However, one thing about MARDOK's gameplay that we actually do know for sure, because it's been confirmed by Riot, is that his ultimate was Chum the Waters. Yep, the exact same ultimate that now exists on Fizz actually came from the design for MARDOK, of throwing out a fish, latching it onto a target, and then that spawns like a shark that knocks him up and deals damage. And it even had the exact same name and pretty much everything in the version that existed on MARDOK. And unfortunately, since we know that his ultimate was stolen completely by Fizz from his gameplay design, here's where the potential for MARDOK kind of starts to fall apart. And the reasons as for why MARDOK got cancelled is a little bit interesting. At the time, when they were developing the character, it was a little bit of a tough champion to sell because of some problems related to China. They were getting ready for the Chinese release, or perhaps the Chinese release had happened very recently, and skeleton-esque characters are actually very taboo in Chinese gaming because of the laws and stuff that they have in place, and so if they wanted to make MARDOK, they actually would have had to change his character a lot to be released in China, and so MARDOK kind of fell apart due to that, and a couple other reasons during his development cycle. Essentially because of the Chinese thing, they lost a bit of the incentive to make the champion that was already kind of failing, and so they decided to cancel him. However, the writer who presented the concept did want to play around with it a bit and see if he could find another form for the character to exist. Now that form that would contain the repurposing of MARDOK has probably already happened, to be honest, and I do have to admit that MARDOK isn't entirely a unique champion anymore, and he contributed a lot to the development of a couple other characters. His exact ultimate, word for word, mechanic for mechanic, was incorporated into Fizz, and his lore sounds a lot like what might have happened to Tahm Kench, and the whole Collector of Souls concept was also incorporated into Thresh. And since the skeleton character is one that has a lot of problems due to the Chinese market, MARDOK definitely has a little bit less potential than some of the other champion concepts that we've taken a look at on this channel. But I think MARDOK is still a pretty interesting character, and so although he's a pretty big long shot to actually get released in the future, it's always fun to take a look at concepts and speculate and show off the kinds of characters that could have existed in League of Legends, as well as the kinds of characters that might exist in the future. And if you think about it, MARDOK has kind of been released already, just in the form of Fizz, and pretty much every cancelled champion that we take a look at has been reincarnated in some minor way, shape, or form. Some are just more obvious than others. But anyway, what do you think about MARDOK? Is there a way that his character could be released that hasn't already been incorporated into the game? Leave a comment, thanks for watching, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you guys next time.